Well, it is time now for our fireside chat on the increasing use of AI in pharmaceutical industry. Well, how does AI help organizations drive better data-driven decision-making? What are some of the current obstacles with AI in the pharmaceutical industry and the natural language processing, which is the NLP in pharmaceuticals? Well, ladies and gentlemen, for this, we're joined by our speakers. First up, Peter Henstock, machine learning and AI lead at Pfizer, joining us from US. Well, Peter is recognized as being one amongst the top 12 leaders in AI and pharma globally by the Deep Knowledge Analytical Group. His work is focused at the intersection of AI visualization, statistics, and software engineering applied mostly to drug discovery, but most recently to clinical trials. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today and giving us your valuable time. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Great to have you, Peter. Also joining Dr. Peter is our moderator, Dr. Adam Chee, the Chief Smart Health Leadership Center, Institute of Systems Science, National University of Singapore. Well, Dr. Adam has more than 20 years of health informatics, digital health, innovation, technologies, and business experience. A recognized subject matter expert, Adam serves as an expert in digital health with WHO and holds faculty positions with institutes of higher learning in the region. Thank you so much, Dr. Adam, for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, with this, we've got Dr. Peter and Dr. Adam on your stage and screen. With this, it is time now to start with the fireside chat. Over to you.
Right. Actually, I'm very excited. So I'm going to start off. Hello again. My name is Adam. And definitely excited about this panel because I have Peter here. I deal with a lot of AI in health and healthcare, not so much in pharmaceutical, so it'll be a great learning experience for me as well. I'm just going to start off very quickly by asking Peter. So your title is Machine Learning and AI Lead at Pfizer. What exactly is your role at Pfizer? What does that title mean?
Yes, Adam, thank you very much for that. I'm coming to you from Boston. It's now 10 o'clock at night here. I just finished teaching a class for a couple hours, so I teach as well as you. But at Pfizer, my title is, I'm trying to be an AI evangelist. Pfizer and most pharma have had a kind of a strange history with artificial intelligence. It officially never existed until a few years ago, but I've been doing it for about 20 years at Pfizer. And so they didn't really have a name for it. AI wasn't very popular, but I was working on different special algorithms, I called it, for a while. It turned into a software role, it turned into a statistics role, and now I'm working, I switched from a digital group into a statistics group, and I'm now trying to bring AI and machine learning across the organization, trying to explain what it means to the top leaders, trying to lead the bottom as they move forward and try to use it for different problems. And so it's a mixture role of trying to find the right strategy, trying to identify the opportunities for it across the company, and most of all, evangelizing it, since I think it has a lot to offer overall.
To be honest, I kind of envy your job just by listening to it. So you mentioned that this is a role that you have been doing, but not holding the formal title, if you will. So I'm sort of curious, is that the same across the pharmaceutical space? Because at companies like Amazon, Facebook, etc., AI has a very specific role. How do, and you mentioned that some of the tasks you do is to evangelize, explore new markets. So that is Pfizer. How about the rest of the pharmaceutical industry? Is this the same trends we're seeing across the board?
Yeah, I think the whole industry has kind of woken up to AI when everyone else in the world has woken up to it. I remember a recruiter told me several years ago, "You're a data scientist." It's like, a what? Data scientist? Oh yeah, it's a new coined word that they suddenly gave me for someone who's not a programmer, but also doing this thing called artificial intelligence, and not a statistician either. So it was this unique opportunity that I think everyone woke up to. Harvard Business Review wrote this article in 2012. It said that data science is the sexiest job for the century. And so far it's holding to be true. And so with the realization that AI could add value to different companies, I think most industries started gravitating towards it. Amazon has a very specific role for where AI fits in. It's in their recommendation engine. And they've invested thousands of employees and many millions of dollars to make that as good as possible. But the return is about $70 billion just from that one piece of technology, which is a massive, amazing thing. And eBay and Netflix, which we have over here and probably over there as well, they're also earning about $1 billion a year just with the AI component. In pharma, well, it doesn't break down that easy. Our mission is to come up with and develop drugs, but that's not an AI problem. It doesn't translate into a classifier or a clustering system, but instead it's a serving thousands of different projects that exist as we have different processes that flow in drug discovery and clinical trials and so on, and even in the marketing aspects. And so it's taken a different form across all the different pharma, but all the companies have different strategies of how they organize and try to bring it out. But it's really a recent phenomenon. It's only been recognized in the last several years, and a lot of opportunities still haven't been tackled.
This is interesting because we have seen similar trends in the health and healthcare industry, if you will, where, as you mentioned, decision-making, decision support systems, if you will, has been around in this sector for the longest time. It is to a large extent a older form of AI, but we've never really thought of it that way. So it's like augmentation capabilities. And with the reintroduction of this concept and people making it sound sexy, suddenly there's a wave as well. And similarly, sometimes we have folks in the industry that's confused because what exactly constitutes as AI and what does not. So with that, perhaps you can also further elaborate what sort of problems do you see AI tackle in the pharmaceutical or pharma tech space, given that this is not the most traditional client or specific sector for AI?
Yeah, I think your observations are right on in the sense that we're still trying to define it, and there's still a lot of confusion over the term. In fact, the data science and AI and ML, people ask me almost every day what the difference is between them, and we try to avoid the problem altogether. But the statisticians feel that very strongly that data science is just an extension of what they've been doing for many years, and they're already very capable in it. The digital folks and IT say, well, it's really an extension of programming and computer science. And other people such as bioinformatics and cheminformatics that exist in our field, they say they've been doing it for many years as well. So there is general confusion over the overall term. But I think that what does rise is that there's a great opportunity for this data-driven decision making. And as a scientific-driven company, we've been doing that for many years. But can we augment that with this new technologies of classifications, clustering, deep learning especially? And the answer seems to be over and over again that yes, just like many industries, we're finding a lot of opportunities to enhance our capabilities. And some of the reasons for that is that, well, we have information coming at us faster and faster. We can't read all the articles in any given domain. Even a small sector of cancer is just too much publications going on for us to absorb it and leverage that into our projects. Even large teams have difficulty with this, so how can an individual working in a very specific niche do it? And so it's bringing this information source from the literature, from the omics, transcriptomics, genomics, metabolomics, and other types of areas together with the scientific discovery, our internal databases. Putting all this stuff together and making good decisions on it is where AI is really playing a role. And in specific areas, it's literature mining. It's taking the best science and allowing us to find it. It's creating knowledge graphs and being able to predict different links and side effects and opportunities for new medicines to solve, or old medicines to solve COVID problems. And even the optimization of drugs have been a really interesting area using different deep learning technologies. But we also have traditional things like everyone else, like image processing, predictive models that we see throughout the healthcare models as well.
Very, very fascinating, actually, Peter, very fascinating. Now, you mentioned COVID, so let's touch a little bit on that. As you can see, I'm sure it's the same over the United States. COVID has impacted many industries. So we're still suffering from, I wouldn't say the repercussion because it's still going on. I'll say we're suffering from the effects. So pharma companies has been on the front page of the paper for now. Now, what do you think has been pharma's perspective on AI changing throughout the pandemic?
I'd really like to say that it's been the greatest opportunity we've ever had to leverage AI because we suddenly had a need to leverage all the data, go through all the literature, find the best solutions, and we needed to do this with urgency. AI wasn't really on board at that point. Most of the pharmaceutical companies have the same kind of issue. The data systems were there, but not quite there. They're still being wrangled, and all of the data science and AI really has to develop from the AI. Most of the pharmaceutical companies are decades old. We have technologies that date back into the 70s in many cases. We're still kind of wrangling all the data sets together and modernizing them and putting them together in different ways. Plus the amount of new information that we're acquiring with genomics companies and all these new technologies just keeps increasing. So we're still in the process of putting all these different data sets together. And that's also true of the public health. We couldn't get a good readout of who's affected across the country, and it took months for all these things to kind of line up. And now we have fantastic reporting systems across the country of public health. And so in the same way, I think pharma has been doing the same thing. We've recognized the opportunity and the need to do a better job. And so there's been a greater emphasis across the industry to align our different data sets and make use of them. As soon as it kicked off, of course, with COVID, there were lots of different competitions on Kaggle, which is one of the big competition sites where you can set up a problem. People were predicting time courses and the peaks and valleys and when we'd all go back to work. Most of them were not true, unfortunately, and so there were a lot of learnings in the process. But there was one great success story. Benevolent AI, which is an AI-driven pharmaceutical company in UK, identified one drug that existed already and made a prediction using their knowledge graph in the course of about a day that this would make a good candidate for solving some of the COVID issues. And they gave that away freely as part of the consortium, which was a wonderful success story from AI.
You mentioned quite a fair bit of topics on data. Now, data in my side of the pond, on my side of the pond, is a love-hate relationship. We need data, but most of the time we can't get data. It's not that they're not available. They are available, but not accessible. And when they are accessible, they are at times not usable. Do you actually face the same type of problems over at the pharmaceutical space?
We definitely do. As I mentioned, we've had databases that go back to the 1970s, which have different technologies associated with them. So integrating all this data is kind of the first step that we have, then cleaning it, and then doing machine learning and so on it. We spent a few years actually trying to align different databases. We're now getting closer to the point that many things are usable. We've connected a lot of our databases with graph technology, which is a major improvement for aligning and reconciling different data sets. So that is now proceeding, probably based on COVID, much faster than it was otherwise. But we still have issues of lack of integration, different systems and providers give us different pieces and views of the data. And the real opportunities are to put all these things together so we can use the clinical data in discovery. We can use the real world data associated with our clinical trials. We can wear our Fitbits and other sensors and integrate that for assessing clinical trials and do people really take their medicines and how is it working? So there's still room to grow and many opportunities, but again, the story, just like yours, begins with data.
It sounds like overall, Pfizer is a very agile company. You guys pivot according to needs and times in demand. So is that generally the same for all pharmaceutical companies, in your opinion?
I think we're all aspiring to be agile, but I think we're all working through our issues. There's still many data challenges, and just the volume of data makes it a challenge. For clinical trials, we have images, we have video, we have wearable sensor data, genomics, omics, and those are just our internal data sets. There's also publicly shared data sets that are too large to bring in that we get from different institutes, universities, collaborations. We have companies like 23andMe, which have genetic data. All these things have to be integrated and they come in pieces and in packages. And even the articles and literatures, it's a licensing challenge because some publishers give us some for some fee and others we have to pay for. But do we pay for it before we can use it? And can we predict which ones are worth paying for? We struggle with even these challenges.
Sounds like, you guys are pretty much in the same predicament as the rest of us, mere mortals over the hospital end. It does seem that there are a lot of challenges, even though you articulated, perhaps these are your past experience. So on hindsight, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced so far when it comes to adopting AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have a number of different challenges. I mentioned the data already, but even finding the right people.
Mm.
We're competing against the Googles and the technical companies and great places to work. Pfizer is also a great place to work, I would argue, but we're looking for a different skill set. Instead of just the statistics or those three-ring diagrams called the unicorn slide, which says we need to have people who have statistics and math understanding, programming skill sets, in software engineering ideally, as well as subject matter expertise. The Googles could focus on the first two, but we really like people who understand the problems. And when I started at Pfizer, I thought I understood some biology. Honestly, I didn't. I had to go back to school. I thought I understood more things and really couldn't understand the conversations, yet alone solve the problems because I couldn't understand what they were looking for, what it meant, and how these things worked. And so it's this a triple skill set is really important in finding people. In addition, we are an old company and we have a set ways of doing things which have been arguably successful. For AI to come in and say, well, okay, let's let AI solve problems, that means displacing other people and changing the paradigm that we're operating in. And while everyone is trying to do the most innovative things and leverage the best technologies, we still have to sell it. And I compare this to Amazon that we're not Amazon and that we don't have this core problem of one technical solution, but really thousands of different solutions. Which one do we pick from? Even that's a challenge. And there's a sea of different technologies and vendors who are providing solutions. How do we choose the right ones to go after? Because everyone goes to a conference, they meet 10 different vendors who can solve the problems using AI. Which one do we go with? Even that's a challenging thing to evaluate the right solutions. So it's a major strategy challenge to get everyone on board and understand with the same definitions of what AI and what it can do and understand it at all levels of the organization. And we're still working towards that as are most pharma companies.
Now, this is great insight because we do see similar issues, if we will, quite barriers towards adopting AI and also raising awareness. Because there are so many times I go into the room, have a conversation, and I have clinical folks who have seen some commercial somewhere already on a magazine that has been written up by marketing guys, and they get this impression that AI is going to come in, take away all the problems. So some sort of magical pill, and they don't even think of the need to consider the underlying requirements, consideration, or whether it's actually applicable in context. So, you mentioned that it has been similar in your case. You're trying to figure out how to sell them. So, how would you go about convincing some of these stakeholders? Because the differences I see in the clinical setting is they are facing patients. So they have this very set mindset of what they want to achieve. Whereas over at your side, which I'm assuming, because I'm not an expert, you guys are open to discovering new drugs. So you have a general direction, but not a very specific aim, I guess. So how do you go around handling that?
Right, so there's a few different issues there. There's a clinical versus discovery. In the discovery, most of the data is somewhat open, and so we have a lot of academic researchers and partners that we deal with. In terms of convincing people, the problem is that there's thousands of different problems to go after. And so we need a coherent strategy. We look for problems that tend to align with each other, such as literature search. We do it in 10 different groups. Some people are doing it for safety, some are doing it for competitive intelligence, but it's still literature search. So can we identify some key strategies that go across all these different areas? And that's been a challenge. In terms of convincing people, the best thing I found was that we taught an internal course. We said, come learn about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We gave an 8-week seminar. We intended it to be most of the lower level people who would join it and say, yes, I want to do it and I want to try it out. What we found is a lot of the senior people joined in and they canceled their leadership meetings and said, I want to attend this one session to figure out what it is and what it can do for me. And that changed the conversations throughout the company. So it was quite successful in winning some hearts and minds. But we still have a lot of people who are excellent scientists. They believe the data and they want it proven to them and so we have to prove one problem at a time and chip away at the overall belief. But we're getting momentum now. We're growing in our AI capabilities and in size, but still a long way to go.
That's interesting. That's good news to hear. I do have one other question regarding regulation. So this was also touched on in the previous session. by some of our colleagues in other companies. As you know, pharmaceutical industry is heavily regulated worldwide, no matter where you guys go. So how comfortable are government agencies, in your opinion, like FDA in the United States, EMA in Europe, in dealing with AI, ML techniques?
Yeah, for the FDA and other these government agencies, they're very conservative. And so they are moving quite slow in the process, but they are moving in the right direction. And things have definitely been accelerating with the COVID. It changed a lot of the mindsets of the concept of going into a clinic and getting a blood sample and doing these kinds of things are all different. So how can we leverage AI for prioritization and other aspects? So for some of the approvals, we're still going to rely on statistics, but we see wearable devices playing a larger role, more being approved. There are about 500 different clinical trials that are involving some kind of a wearable device at this point. And so it is increasing, it's going in the right direction, and all groups are talking about it. So it's a slow moving process and a work in progress, but it's definitely moving in a faster rate thanks to COVID.
I'm going to ask you the last question because due to the lack of time, lack of perceived time, what do you think are the next big areas in artificial intelligence and machine learning that will transform the pharmaceutical space?
Yes, there's several different areas. One is the wearable sensors. It's supposed to be, it's roughly doubling every year. And so we expect this is going to be changing clinical trials because we can now ask someone to take a device home and use it, and we can get many more measurements than we could otherwise, rather than coming into the clinic and getting maybe one number over the course of a couple hours for, say, a Parkinson's disease. That's one area. The second one is drug optimization. We've seen a whole change of the overall field of different ways of representing chemical compounds and small molecules using graph networks and other types of descriptors. And so deep learning for optimization is the latest thing, and it's proving very effective. And so if we can use it for small molecules, we'll also be able to use it for biologicals. I think that's a really exciting area. Tapping the literature and getting more work into clinical trials, I think, is a key area. It's where we spend a lot of money. It's very expensive to do it right, but can we add exploratory arms and do better analyses with statistics, with devices and other aspects? I think these are really exciting areas that will be seen leveraged more in the future.
We see some similar trends like wearables, which will also trying to encourage the adoption. There are challenges, as you would understand. But yeah, definitely, if the general consensus is if we move towards preventive care, which you need continuous data. So I get what you're talking about. The whole paradigm could potentially shift. Yeah, so definitely agree with your points. You know, Peter, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I personally learned a lot from this conversation alone, so thank you so much. I hope the audience too have benefited from this very short conversation. You know, as the saying goes, time is relative and time is always not enough. Right? Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adam and Dr. Peter. Definitely, absolutely hooked onto the screen. Everyone's viewing in, a lot of comments, a lot of participation has been coming in forth to your fireside chat. So thank you once again for that wonderful chat today.